As the kids head back to school, are you thinking about heading back to savings? It's the perfect time to refocus on your home financing with the Sharp Loan Team at Highlands Mortgage. With interest rates lower than your back-to-school checklist, they're here to guide you through financing or buying that dream home you've always wanted. Get tailored service that meets the unique needs of your family. Enjoy competitive rates that make switching a no-brainer. Access expert advice to navigate the complexities of refinancing or making your first purchase. And with their convenient online process, managing your mortgage will fit right into your busy lifestyle. So you ready to learn how much you can save? Join the savvy homeowners of the Triad who trust the Sharp Loan Team to help them with their mortgage needs. Refinance or buy, let's connect and chat about your savings plans today. Visit sharploans.com and take that first step toward better financial health. Remember, school's back in session along with the savings. Choose the Sharp Loan Team, your smart partner in home financing. Call them today, 336-575-9448.
This is the Triad Podcast Network.
Hi, everyone. Hope you're doing well, and we appreciate you stopping by for another episode with our certified financial planner, Jennifer Johnson, with Three Magnolias Financial Advisors. They are located right here in Winston-Salem. She's been doing podcasts for us now for a long time, and we love her advice. If you're interested in finding our previous episodes, you can do so in our archives. You can find them on her website, threemagnoliasfinancialadvisors.com. And we put all of her contact information in our show notes. Previously, we discussed a very chaotic time in the market that had to do with employment rates, had to do with some international after effects or shock waves, I guess you could say. But as we discussed, things are still fairly stable. The Dow is still over 40,000. So we're still in a very healthy place financially. But today, our conversation is one that I honestly didn't know very much about. And it revolves around an article that we're going to link to as well, about a generation of folks that are heading toward retirement. And the headline of this article is America's 60-year-olds are staring at financial peril. And look, we understand that headlines are sometimes made to generate some sort of emotion or get you to click on something. But I think based on what we know about this story right now, Jennifer, that this is not just trying to get people to click on something with an ominous headline. There's some legitimate worry here for people that this applies to. So explain to us and our listeners what we're going to be discussing today and what this issue is at hand.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, this article caught my eye. This is, I think, one of what they're planning to do is a series of articles in the Wall Street Journal focusing on a group of Americans that most people I think have heard of called the baby boomers. Those are folks, born after World War II, when military personnel came home and a lot of them started their families all at once. And those folks have been moving into retirement for a while, actually, because some of them, would be born as early as 1945, 46, right? So, certainly they're getting up there in age. What I thought was really interesting about this article in particular is that it focused on the younger group of what we would still call baby boomers, right? So they're still kind of in that grouping of Americans. The younger, some of the younger members of that category will turn 60 this year. So they're moving into retirement too. But one thing's really different for them as opposed to some of the older groups in that these folks live through a transition in retirement planning that was traditionally for, older siblings, certainly maybe their parents, where they relied on pensions. And these folks were part of a transition that moved away from pensions and more toward 401k or IRA savings. And I just thought it was interesting. This was a little bit of a look at how are we doing, right? What does retirement look like for those folks that are now turning 60, because they're getting close, right? They're getting really close to moving in retirement. So it's a real critical period. So it takes a look at those folks as a group to say, okay, how are they doing? Does it look like they're well prepared? Or does it not? And I think they give it away a little bit with the headline, don't they?
Yeah,
They're
don't think
staring
so.
at financial
Right.
peril.
Yeah. Well, before we get into the article itself, can you level set for a moment and describe what is a pension and
Sure.
how does it differ from what most people will use now, which is a 401k for
That's
retirement?
right. Yeah, that's right. So a pension, and certainly some folks that are retired today have pensions where, it was a very sort of traditional way where you went to work for one company, out of high school or college. You traditionally stayed with that company through maybe your whole career. You went to work for IBM and you worked for IBM that whole 30, 40 years, right? And then the agreement was, okay, after so many years of service, and you hit a certain age, sometimes they have different qualifications for that. But the way it works is they say, okay, you can now retire, and we will agree as part of our pension program to pay you X dollars, usually based on your salary while you were working there, for the rest of your life, right? So they didn't have to manage that. They don't get any choice in that either. Like a lot of times the employee is making some contributions. If people are familiar with how our state of North Carolina still has a pension program. In that one, where if say you're a teacher or another state employee, employees are required to put a little bit in there as part of that program. And then certainly the state is making up the difference in whatever needs to be funded to create that income stream for them, right? So very different way of thinking about it than today, right? And when we think about retirement planning, I mean, for one, I don't think anybody today expects to go work for one company
Mhm.
and stay there their whole career. At least I don't think so. I could be wrong. I don't know how you feel about that,
Oh,
Adam.
I think I would assume that you're correct on that one.
Yeah. I think they change a lot, right?
Mhm.
And so, you wouldn't, even if that company offered a pension plan, you probably wouldn't be there long enough, to build up enough of a benefit, even if they offered it. And a lot of companies, back a number of years ago, switched from these pension plans. I think it was probably around the 80s where you saw a real acceleration in which companies moved away from pension plans and they said, okay, employees, instead of doing the pension plan where you don't have any choice in it and we manage it for you and we provide a guarantee, we're going to give you a 401k a lot of times with a match, right? Which we've talked about before, like how important that is. But with 401k, you do get a lot more control. One, you can typically completely opt out of it, right? I mean, so you could say, okay, I could put money in, and a lot of times if you put money in, your employer will match that. Maybe it's a match up to 6%, for example, which means if you put in 6% out of your pay, your employer matches some or all of that 6%. So that goes into this retirement account called a 401k. And then that, you're a lot of times managing those investments on your own, right? So you're making those choices. With a pension plan, there was a professional team, managing that pension, understanding what their obligations were and the funding that's in there. With 401k, that's on you, right? Similarly with IRA, right, or individual retirement account, people have heard of that. That's not necessarily something you would do through payroll at your company. It might be something you do on your own. But again, something that requires, you to take the responsibility, you to open it, you to put money in by choice, you to control the investments. So it's definitely a different, there's more obligation on the part of the employee, if that makes sense. More
Yeah.
control too. So if you
Mhm.
change jobs, like if you weren't there long enough to build up a pension, maybe you got nothing or very little. With
Yeah.
your 401k, you do have that control over it, where you typically can roll it over. But, with control and choice, comes some responsibility.
Who's ready for movie night? Our friends at the Ginther Group Real Estate are proud to sponsor another season of innovation and cinema at Bailey Park in downtown Winston-Salem's Innovation Quarter. The next film is Barbie on Friday, September 20th. Bring your chair or blanket to Bailey Park for a great night of cinema from Aperture and beverages and food from a variety of local vendors. Pre-film fun begins at 6:30 p.m. and the movie begins at dark. These magical movie nights are made possible by the Ginther Group, the real estate experts we trust and showcase right here on the Triad Podcast Network. Check their social media for info on each upcoming movie night. And for your real estate needs, call 336-283-8689 or visit theginthergroup.com. Buying, selling, investing, or just learning. Whatever you need, start now. And like me, you can become a Ginther Group client for life.
So what is happening here? You explained it a little bit at the beginning, but are we saying that there's a generation of people that, again, they're on the younger end of the spectrum of baby boomers
Right.
and about to turn 60, and they spent a good chunk of their career where pensions were the norm.
Right.
And as they got later in life, they left their company and they started a 401k, but they started so late in their career that they just don't have much in terms of saving. Is that what we're talking about here?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they highlight in this article a few what look to be real life examples of people that have been in certain situations where, they've started late. I think is a good way to think about it. Maybe they certainly wouldn't have started earlier in their career saving like we would encourage people to do. There's a few other things I think too that were mentioned in a couple of examples. One was, with some of these retirement accounts, unlike a pension, where if I said, I'm into financial problems here, I need some money, out of my pension plan. Well, you can't do that, right? I mean, you can't, that's just not even a choice, in almost any circumstance that I've ever heard of. But what's interesting is with 401k, particularly, you changing jobs, or maybe you start an IRA, and you lose your job back in the Great Recession of 2008. A lot of those folks, I think, were undersaved and then also took withdrawals. They took money out of the accounts, right? And they took it out at a bad time and paid tax and paid penalties a lot of times. And so that set their savings behind as well. Does that make sense too?
Yeah, it does. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think there's a few things. One is that when these folks that are turning 60 now, or in the next few years, probably when they started their careers, they went to work somewhere thinking, like, unlike us who know we probably won't work for 40 years with the same company. They went to work thinking like, okay, I'm going to work for Western Electric or wherever that might be, and I'm going to be here forever. I don't really have to think about this too much. It's just my time of service. And then kind of mid-career, like, that world was kind of shaken for them. And then all of a sudden they're being told, well, you got to save, and here's how these are going to work. And it's just a really big, big change. And I don't think they were quite prepared for it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So what do the numbers say in terms of how exactly?
How we're doing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How are these people doing? Where in terms of, you say, hey,
Yeah,
they're in
it's not
financial
great.
peril. So
Right.
what do those numbers bear
Yeah.
out?
Yeah, it's not great. Yeah, I know a recent study mentioned in this article looked at these numbers, and there are roughly 30 million of these folks that are going to turn 65 in the next few years. About half of them, or a little over half actually, have less than $250,000 in financial assets. So you're turning 60 and you have less than $250,000 saved.
To potentially carry you for the next 20 to 30 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I don't think people need to be an advisor to realize these folks are under, that's not enough,
Mhm.
right? I mean, they're definitely undersaved. I think it's clear they're going to be relying on Social Security, right,
Mhm.
to really provide for them. And, Social Security's unlikely to be adequate income, for most of these folks, unfortunately. So looking at these numbers, I would say, the grade first for this transition to sort of self-saving, employee taking responsibilities, not great.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess the other, you can look at Social Security as something to help, but as this article says, it was never designed to be your primary source of income when you retire. The
Right.
other option is you can't retire. You got to keep working.
Yeah, you got to keep working. I mean, I think that's another thing that's mentioned here is a lot of people, and I do hear these in conversation with people is, well, I know I'm going to have to work. I'm planning to continue to work, and so yeah, I think it's sometimes I don't know if excuse is the right word, but it's sort of a rationale for not saving. But they mention it here. I think a lot of times people do overestimate their ability to continue to work. I mean, particularly if you're talking about working, past your 60s, like that's pretty difficult in a lot of cases. You may have health issues that would make that very difficult to do. You just for changes in the workplace, sometimes it's difficult to find the right place. I mean, we all know, I think that's challenging, but it's interesting to hear people say, well, I'm planning to just keep working. And I think that's out of necessity, but in some cases, but I think that's also really, maybe unrealistic, if that makes sense
Yeah.
too.
You might want to keep working, but depending on what your job is, are you physically able to? And I
Yeah.
mean, there's testimonials and stories of people in this article that say, I just want to keep working because I don't want to have my children have to financially support me. You
Right.
know,
Right. I
I
know.
think when we talk about kids caring for their parents, sometimes they think it's just because it's health related, right? Some people
Right.
don't think about the idea that, oh wow, they might need financial support just to be able
Sure.
to pay rent, pay mortgage, pay everyday expenses.
I know. I know. You don't really think about that. And I think certainly for, their children who would be probably, people my age or a little bit younger, maybe. I mean, that's tough. I mean, because I'm talking to those folks about preparing for their own retirements. I mean, I think it's ambitious to think they would also help, pay for an aging parent
Hmm.
too. I mean, that's definitely a big burden, I think.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess, I don't know how many people will find this conversation relevant, but if you're not in this baby boomer generation, you're in a younger
Right.
generation, is this a kind of a word of warning in terms of,
Mhm.
hey, this is what happens
Yeah.
if you wait too late to save in a 401k, even if your company doesn't offer one, if you don't work in a way like a full-time job where maybe you're a freelancer, you don't have a full-time job where you can do a 401k, you can still open up your own retirement account, an
Right.
IRA. And
Right.
so what's the lesson here for
What's the
people
takeaway?
that
Yeah.
aren't in this same age range?
Yeah, because I doubt they're probably not listening to us. So, my hope would be folks that are listening maybe are thinking about their own, financial preparedness and, readiness. And, you'd hope they would look at this and say, okay, what do I need to do so that this is not my situation when I'm turning 60 and I'm facing retirement. And my hope certainly as an advisor is I don't want this to be a verdict on retirement planning or 401ks or IRAs. I think in all likelihood, this may be the result of this particular generation or group of retirees now that are caught in this transition, right, where they started their careers with one set of expectations, and they were unfortunately kind of, that didn't work out the way they thought. And so it was just a really difficult thing for them to overcome. Those of us that have entered the workforce after baby boomers, didn't go in with that expectation. So hopefully they've understood that, we need to take the reins on our financial, planning, our retirement planning. So I would like to think that, we're off to a better start maybe than these folks will, for one. But I think definitely there's a few, I would say, 4 kind of takeaways, I guess, from this that I would leave folks with. One, I think this makes clear how important it is for us to take responsibility for our savings. I mean, I think it's clear from this that, we certainly can't rely on, pensions and, even Social Security, which, it looks like the average Social Security benefit is less than $1,800 a month right now. I mean, that's just with the way inflation is and things going up. I just can't imagine, trying to live on that. So you
Not going
certainly
to go very far. Yeah.
Yeah, you just can't. So, recognize that, that you need to take the reins here. And I would start as soon as possible, right? So if you're, listening to this and you haven't done something, do something, now, take advantage if you've got something at your workplace, particularly that matches for you, any kind of benefit that you can sign up for. Really look at that. And I would say start now, if that makes sense. Start now.
Great advice for sure.
Life is full of celebrations, birthdays, holidays, life milestones, and so much more. And who has been helping generations of families celebrate these events? Our friends at Dewey's Bakery. And even if you aren't planning for something in the near future, you don't have to wait to enjoy something savory and delicious from Dewey's. Maybe you just need something to get you through your Mondays. Drop by every Monday for a free Cake Square Day. No purchase necessary. Just come celebrate the start of a new week. So, if you're hearing this ad on a Monday and you're in your car, reset that GPS and get to one of their 3 Triad locations immediately in Winston-Salem at Thruway and Renolda Manor, plus one in Greensboro at Friendly Shopping Center. And any day of the week, you can find the perfect item with fast and easy ordering options at local.deweys.com. Plus, Dewey's does so much to help celebrate our community. To date, they've given back over $4 million to local schools, churches, and other nonprofits. Your next celebration isn't complete without something special from Dewey's Bakery. Dewey's. Celebrate every day.
Anything else that caught your eye or that you'd like to point out from this story? Again, we'll link it in the show notes, but anything that you think is worth discussing?
I think recognize that you might need to work longer, right? So if you do hear, which one thing we didn't mention, with pensions, a lot of times, if say you start working for a company in your 20s, you put in a 30-year period, maybe you're retiring in your 50s, right? So fairly early retirement, if you think about that way, recognize that, that's probably not going to be you, right? You're probably not going to be retiring at 52, right? But don't use that as an excuse or rationale to not save, if that makes sense. So make sure, even though you recognize, yes, you will probably need to work longer maybe than prior generations. That doesn't mean you don't need to save, and start sooner. And I think also important things, there's a few scenarios here for health reasons and job loss, and I'm sure were really good reasons, but at the time they would dip into their retirement savings. They would take money out early, and that was it's clearly that is really devastating for people. So really try hard, I think, to not dip into the savings you have.
Yeah. The other thing I might add to that is, as we talk about a generation where it's more likely for people to not work at the same company for their career, to work for different companies over the course of their professional lives, there's a lot of things to consider when you move to a different company. And a lot of people might just look at, well, what's my new salary going to be? How much more am I going to get paid?
Yeah, right.
It also matters in terms of when you're researching whether it's the right move, what is their retirement option? Do
Yeah.
they offer a company match? Because you can take whatever the salary is, you can figure out how much you would want to save from a percentage standpoint, factor in the match that the company provides, and be able to extrapolate that out over a number of years. That's maybe something people don't look a lot at, but that's something you should inquire about if you're
Mhm.
changing jobs.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, and one I had not really thought of. But I think that's definitely something, because if you think about the time value of that money, like something we've talked about before, that could be huge. And certainly something I've noticed in working with people, is as I work with folks, something happens, I think around age 45, where people start to seek out an advisor. And if they've been with a company or a nonprofit or wherever they were encouraged to participate in a plan, they were able to start pretty early, they got a match, or their company or organization was putting something in for them, they are so much further along
Yeah.
than somebody who had to figure that out on their own and how to get started. So I think that's really powerful, those workplace plans. And I think you're right, it's something that is kind of overlooked or forgotten in maybe what you might call a gig economy, right? Where people are taking, not even a traditional employee, maybe, and they maybe never think about that, right, as part of
Right.
their compensation or their need. I mean, you could very easily see those folks in situations like these individuals where, all of a sudden you're going to be 60 and realize you have, very modest retirement savings, and you're not sure, how much longer can you actually work, and then you end up on things like Medicaid, which is, for low income people, Social Security. You just end up, vulnerable to those programs. I mean, the good news is, if you do start early, even, we've talked about this before, the power of, even small amounts of money saved consistently and invested properly over a long period of time just makes a huge difference. And so, I don't want to paint, an overly negative picture. I think what I, again, would hope people would take from this is that you have an opportunity to really improve your future, but nobody's going to take the steps for you, right? I mean, you have to, you've got to make that a priority. You're going to have to take some initiative, because we just don't live in a world anymore where those things are done for us.
Yep. Yeah. And as we've said many, many times, compound interest is a wonderful thing. So take
Yeah.
advantage of
Yeah.
it as early as you can. Jennifer has been great for me and my family, because with our 401k, she's helped to figure out what's the best strategy in terms of how to allocate that percentage that we contribute every month, and then also with other accounts, individual accounts. So regardless of what situation you're in, Jennifer is an option if you'd like to reach out to a certified financial planner. Jennifer, how can they do so?
Yeah, welcome, folks. Check us out online. We'll link the website, I'm sure. We're a local company too here in Winston-Salem, and you're welcome to call us at 336-701-1600. They can shoot me an email. My email is jennifer@3-magnolias with an s.com. So would love to hear from the folks. Hopefully this will encourage people to, take action.
Yeah. I know that it would if I was in that position as well. But even if you're not in the age range where this is necessarily something that's relevant to you, don't put yourself in this position 20, 30, 40 years from now,
Yeah.
no matter where you are in life. So, Jennifer, thank you for the time. As always, we'll talk to you again next month.
Thank you.
Securities offered through Private Client Services, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Three Magnolias Financial Advisors, located at 110 Oakwood Drive, Suite 480, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, 27103. Three Magnolias Financial Advisors and Private Client Services are not affiliated. Private Client Services is under separate ownership from any other named entity. All information is believed to be from reliable sources. However, we make no representation as to its completeness or accuracy. All economic and performance information is historical and not indicative of future results. The market indices discussed are unmanaged. Additional risks are associated with international investing, such as currency fluctuations, political and economic stability, and differences in accounting standards. The views depicted in this material are for information purposes only, and not necessarily those of Private Client Services. They should not be considered specific advice or recommendations for any individual. Neither Private Client Services nor any of its representatives may give legal or tax advice.
This is the Triad Podcast Network.